Welcome to Considering Your Career Options. What can you do today? A webinar from the AmeriCorps Vista program. I'm Andy King, your host for today's session. I'll be introducing our session and all of our presenters, and later on I'll be back with you for the Q&A session. Joining me today are other members of our team to support you in your learning. Jessica Knight and Andy Clark are with Education Northwest. They'll be joining me in monitoring the Q&A and the chat to make sure we can get your questions answered. And it's my distinct honor to introduce you to today's presenters. Leading our presentation, we're delighted to have with us Dr. Erin Barnhart. Dr. Barnhart is the founder and president of Effective Altruism, LLC, as well as the Director of Operations for the American Gap Association. She serves on the Board of Directors for Building Bridges Coalition. She's on the Oregon Committee on Volunteerism, and she serves as an online instructor for the AmeriCorps Vista Blend course. She teaches sections on volunteer mobilization. And Erin is an adjunct professor at the University of Oregon and Concordia University, Portland. And the best part of her resume, Erin is an AmeriCorps and CCC alum. Later on in the session, we're going to hear from Signa Bishop, who's going to share her perspective on career development as a Vista alum. Signa has been working in the training and development field in higher education, nonprofit, and national service settings for the past 10 years. She has a master's degree in education and a certificate in intercultural training and development through Portland State University. Before joining OHSU in 2013 to work on leadership development, Signa worked for several nonprofits, recruiting volunteers, engaging students in service, running college access programs, and managing AmeriCorps programs. Signa also got her professional start as an AmeriCorps Vista. So let's take a look at the goals for today's session. By the end, we'd like you to be able to first of all identify some potential career options that you may like to explore, and then be able to access resources that can help you in your career exploration process. We're going to offer you some strategies that you'll be able to apply for effective networking, and then we're going to give you some tips and hope that you'll be able to identify your own next steps for engaging in career exploration and development. In terms of our agenda, we're going to start out by looking at what the modern career landscape looks like these days. We'll talk about some of the specific career exploration strategies, including reflection, research, and networking. And as I alluded, we're going to hear from a Vista alum about her experience in career exploration, and then we'll offer you some next steps and resources before we get to your questions. Now, you may have noticed that we have available for you a reflection guide to go along with today's session. This document is intended to help you capture your thoughts and reflections to key questions throughout the presentation. You could use it either during the session for note-taking, or you could use it afterwards to come back and fill out when you've got a little bit more time and space to reflect and think about your own career possibilities. This resource guide includes a summary of the resources and activities that we're going to outline for you in the presentation, and we hope that you'll be able to get started with those activities right away. If you weren't able to download and print this document earlier, you can do it now using the link that is going to appear, or I guess just did appear in the chat window. So you may need to scroll up to see that link. So anyway, this reflection guide is sort of a new approach that we're testing out here, and later on we're going to appreciate hearing your feedback about how useful that is for you. So now I'm going to turn our presentation over to Dr. Erin Barnhart. Erin?
Thank you so much, Andy. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. Before we get started, we'd like to ask a quick question of you. Specifically, where are you in your career development process? You're going to see this question pop up in the poll on the right side of your screen, and you can select an answer based on the ones we provided here. We're going to tally those as we go. Your options for answers are, I have a pretty good idea of what I'd like to do. I have some ideas but need to sort them out. I'm just starting now, but about what I'm thinking, it's just, if I can talk, I'm just now starting to think about what I'd like to do, and I have no idea yet. So we've got that question up there, and I'm seeing responses come in, and we're going to take that information and talk a little more about how you can use the information that we're providing here. The nice thing is if you're at the very beginning of your career development process, we're going to be providing you with a number of tools and strategies that you can use beginning today to start thinking about what you might like to do next. If you have a pretty good idea of what you'd like to do, you're still going to be able to take these tools and move forward and figure out how to find that job that moves you along towards your dream career. So we have our responses here. Looks like they're coming in. Have just a few more seconds on the timer there for the poll. But I do hope that no matter where you are in your process, you're going to find some information that's really useful for you. So let's see, do we have our responses yet? Okay, so we're going to pull those up on the screen here. Looks like most people have some ideas, but they're not quite sure yet what to do with them, and they need to sort them out. That's a pretty common place to be, especially in the midst of doing VISTA. So keep in mind, wherever you are in this process, you're going to be able to take content from today's webinar and get started on your own career development process. So let's start by looking a little bit at the modern career landscape, and that visual you're looking at is pretty accurate. There's a couple of key things to know here. One of them is that modern career paths are not linear. There's a pretty common misconception that we need to find our dream job right away, or that deviating from that dream career path will somehow lead us astray. The reality is that the vast majority of modern career paths are not linear. You likely won't find the exactly perfect first job followed by the exactly perfect next job. Instead, you're more likely going to orbit around specific interests and passions, landing jobs that are the right fit for that moment. And it's going to be because of factors like the role, the location, the compensation, and that's going to set you up for the next role down the line. So please do not panic if the job you find next isn't exactly the one you thought it should be. As long as you're gaining something from it, skills, experience, new connections, you're doing just fine. Another one that you need to keep in mind is that modern jobs also are not lifelong. Unlike the jobs of our grandparents and great-grandparents, today's tenure at any particular place of employment is very rarely going to be for the life of your career. In fact, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2012, the average tenure of a worker at a particular position was 4.4 years, but the expected tenure for millennial workers was even less. And according to a Forbes article that was exploring those statistics, that meant that the average millennial worker may have 15 to 20 jobs over the course of your working years. So again, don't worry so much about any particular job being your forever job. Think about it instead as being your job right now. The last thing to keep in mind is consider each job to be a stepping stone to the next. Knowing that you won't be there forever, and that it's okay to not land your dream job right away, and in fact, in most cases, that's fairly unlikely. You can instead focus your time on gaining as much from your current job as you can. Assess what skills and experiences you can gain from it, and how you can leverage those to prepare you for your next position. And that's going to lead you closer and closer to what you'd eventually like to do. Continuing on our career landscape, let's talk about that idea of the dream job. Finding your dream job is one part opportunity and one part preparation, not presentation, preparation. One of the biggest realities I discovered during my own career path, and has been seconded by many of my peers and my colleagues, is that there are two parts to finding your dream job. The first part is, frankly, sheer luck or opportunity. You need to be looking for the role when it appears, or someone you know needs to see it and send it to you. It needs to be available somewhere you can move, it needs to compensate what you can afford, etc. The other part, though, is preparation. If and when that window of opportunity opens up right next to you, you need to be ready to step through it with the right skills and experiences to land it. Now, I can give you a little example from my own career history in that I knew I wanted to work in the field of civic engagement. I had a passion for all things volunteerism. I was studying it in school. I was trying to find interesting roles that were focused on volunteerism and civic engagement. But I was also starting to panic a little because I was starting to think, how am I going to find a great job that lets me do what I want to do around civic engagement and volunteerism? So I kept pursuing my interests. I kept gaining skills, experiences, and knowledge around civic engagement, and at the same time tried to keep my ears open for opportunities. And I ended up applying for a job that wasn't quite the right fit, but someone on the hiring committee said, hey, you know, you'd actually be great for this other job over here. Can I pass your resume along? And my first thought was, oh, how nice, but no one actually ever does that. Well, she did pass it along, and it ended up opening the door for me to land what was a dream job with Idealist.org for 4 years. And it all was because that window of opportunity happened to open up in that she saw it, saw my resume, and said, hey, I'd love to pass this along, but I was the right fit for the job when it was there. So we can't control the opportunity part, but there is also a lesson here that we can make it more likely to happen. We can do that by strengthening our networks of peers to have them keep an eye out for interesting roles for us. There have also been many jobs I've had since then that a peer or a friend saw and said, hey, you'd be a great fit for this. So this is part of our preparation process as well, and it can potentially directly affect the opportunity half of the formula. As for the rest of it, spend your time focused on gaining the skills, experience, and knowledge needed so that if and when that opportunity comes along, you're ready for it. So we're about to talk career exploration strategies. You'll note in the Venn diagram on your screen that there are 3 circles critical to career exploration. The first of these, and we're going to talk about each one of these, the first of these is personal reflection. The second is gathering input from your inner circle, your friends, your peers, your family, your colleagues. And the third is networking, informational interviews, and research. Again, we're going to spend time on all 3 of these because all 3 of them are critical for finding the sweet spot of career development that exists right in the middle where those 3 circles meet. So let's start with personal reflection. And what we're going to do is look first at interests and skills. What I recommend that you do is spend some time doing some real personal reflection. Now, you're going to notice an image there for the Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers for First-Time Job Seekers. That's a guide that was developed by some of my peers at Idealist, and it's a free online downloadable resource that you'll see on in the chat window. We're also going to share it at the end in resources, and we're going to refer to this several times throughout our day today. So identifying your interests and skills, first and foremost, think about your passions and your interests. And there's a couple of questions you can ask yourself to get to this. What news articles draw you in the most? What kinds of books, blogs, social media posts are most compelling to you? If you could spend your day focused on any particular issue or task or responsibility, what would it look like? Now, in the Idealist Guide, there's a terrific self-assessment activity. I highly recommend you take a look after the webinar today. A note about the guide, it was written specifically for folks looking for work in the nonprofit sector, but there's activities and ideas in there for people looking to work in the public and private sectors as well. Again, I'm going to refer you to a couple specific activities, but after the webinar, I highly recommend that you download it and go through it. So what I want to ask you to do right now is on the side, on a computer, a piece of paper, in your reflection guide, I want you to jot down a couple of your specific interests and passions. Don't put them on the chat window yet, but do just a quick brainstorming of what it is that lights you up. It can be a particular cause, it can be a type of work, it can be a way of engaging in the world that you find most interesting. And when you're ready, then I want you to be thinking about assessing your skills and your talents. Think about what you're good at, and don't be humble. This is not the place to be humble. Think about what your skills are, your abilities are, as well as what might you want to learn. What skills do you hope to gain in the next few years? And again, I want you to write these down in your reflection guide, on a piece of paper, on your computer, and set it aside. But be thinking about what are the things that you're really terrific at, and think about it in terms of hard skills as well as interpersonal skills. One of your talents may be, I can take a big issue and I can break it down into little parts that make it more manageable. That's a real skill. It's just difficult to quantify. So what I'm going to have you do now is I want you to share these in the chat window. We're using the chat window. What you're going to do is share a couple of your top interests and passions, as well as a few of your top skills and talents. And what I'd like you to do is notice what your peers are posting. Obviously, we have a lot of folks on the call here today, but pay attention to what people are writing down, and if someone writes something down that's relevant for you too, make sure you write that down. It may have been something you hadn't considered. Similarly, you may find fellow Vistas who have similar interests or they have similar skills, and these are folks you could connect with. So I'm seeing mentoring, listening, analyzing, information gathering, women's rights and empowerment, leadership, civil rights, economic development, energy efficiency, criminal justice, so many different interests and skills, and these are all within our existing network of VISTA members just here on this webinar. So pay attention to what fellow people are posting and make a note to yourself to follow up with those who have similar interests. And again, write down the ones that are also interests for you. So in my case, I'm going to move forward with the rest of the webinar basically so that I can help you go through the activities. I'm going to pretend that my top interest is animal welfare, and my primary skills are in writing, communications, and outreach. So that's how I'm going to approach these activities. But for yourself, be thinking about what your interests are, what your skills are, and how you might do some of these activities after the webinar. So let's go to the next one, which is thinking about your dream career. I'm going to ask you to visualize what your dream career could look like. If you were telling the story of a day in your life, what might it look like? What kinds of responsibilities would you have? How would you spend your day? What might your successes be? What might your challenges be? Take some time after this webinar to jot down some ideas for this exercise as well, and really spend some time visualizing what your dream career would look like. So in my example, as someone passionate about animal welfare, I want to consider whether I want to spend my day working directly with animals or whether I'd rather be doing something behind the scenes of the organization. I want to think about things like, what level of responsibility do I want to have? Do I want to be running programs? Do I want to be running the whole organization? How would I frame my success in my chosen area? Is success the number of animals I'm able to save? Is it that we're able to come up with innovative programs or run a sustainable organization? Think about what your dream career could potentially look like. That's that activity. So that's personal reflection. Now we're going to go to peer input. Having done the inner looking, I want you to look outwards and talk to your peers, your colleagues, your friends, and your family, and ask them what they think you are good at. What types of careers they might choose for you to consider. So for example, what skills and talents of yours do they identify? Where do those align with what you identified yourself, and what might be some of the things you hadn't considered? Where could they see you thriving? They may have noticed, you know what, you do really well when you work on your own, or I see you really thriving when you're working in a group. Again, things you may not have noticed. Now, this is an especially great activity to complete with your supervisor and your peers at your VISTA site. They've seen you in action, and they likely have a pretty good sense for your strengths and talents. So ask them, if they were the architect of your career, what would they recommend that you do next? You might also consider whether you can use social media to facilitate this type of thoughtful feedback from your friends. Perhaps people will be willing to review your LinkedIn profile, and based on how they know you now, as well as your past experiences, they might be able to write you a short note of recommendation that highlights your strengths and your talents. So now we're going to talk about career research and networking. Again, there's that guide that you're going to refer back to. Having done some personal and some peer reflection, you'll then be ready to do a bit of research and networking to learn more. So I want to share two specific activities that are outlined in the Guide to Nonprofit Careers. The first one is called Career Tracks. The Career Tracks activity, basically what you're going to do is you're going to go to job boards like idealist.org, monster.com, usajobs.gov, Simply Hired, and you're going to search for job postings in your areas of interest. Now, while you're doing this, don't worry whether you're actually qualified for the job, or it pays enough, or it's in an area where you're willing to live. All you're doing at this point is identifying interesting jobs. And you'll just want to copy them or otherwise save them somewhere so that every single job posting that sounds interesting to you, you're setting aside for assessment. Now, after you've set several of those aside, preferably 50 or more, go through them again. and identify those key themes and shared characteristics. You might discover things like you've mostly flagged roles with small organizations or positions where you'd have significant autonomy to work independently. Or you may find that most of them are focused on a particular type of work or issue. You may have found, you know what, I have a real passion for women's rights, and 42 of these 50 jobs work specifically with women's rights issues. Either way, you're likely going to learn more about what kinds of jobs are most interesting to you today, and that's going to offer insight into the kind of work you might want to pursue next. You can also take the activity a few steps further and craft potential career tracks using the data you've collected, and when you go into the guide, it will actually walk you through how to design a career track of your own. So again, using my example of animal welfare, I might flag every job post I can find related to animal husbandry, animal rights, shelters, education, advocacy. I then want to go through them to see if particular traits stand out. Did I choose mostly organizations where I'd have direct contact with animals? Did I mostly identify capacity building roles where I'm building the strength of the organization to be able to serve more? Were the organizations mostly small? Were they mostly large national entities? Was my role in the trenches? Was it leading the organization? Again, I'll want to see what sort of jobs I set aside and which ones interest me the most today. The second activity from this guide that I want to talk briefly about is called the 4 Lenses Framework. And in this activity, you're going to ask yourself questions to identify the types of roles that are most of interest to you according to 4 specific lenses. The issue or the value, which is a matter of public or personal concern, for example, homelessness or civil rights. The organization, which is the type of structure within which you'll do the work, for example, a grassroots nonprofit or a multinational corporation. The role, which is the particular type of work that you would do, for example, marketing or accounting or fundraising. And then the system, which is the interplay between these previous 2 characteristics and how they interact. Now, the goal of this activity is to help you identify if and which one of these lenses might matter to you most as you're looking for your next position. It may be that what matters to you most is the issue. You're not picky about whether you'll work for a small or a big organization or what your role is as long as you're working around animal welfare or women's empowerment. It may be that you want to work for a small grassroots group and you have more flexibility in terms of what your role is and what type of work you might do. It may be that 2 of these are the top of your list and the 3rd one is flexible. So I highly recommend you check out this activity in the guide and go through it yourself so that you can assess what your top priorities are. Again, using that example of animal welfare, I'd want to use these 4 lenses to assess which matter most to me. Is it the issue itself? Or can I strengthen this issue for the right kind of organization? Is it that I'm really more focused on developing skills in a marketing role, or do I prefer to work with animal welfare organizations regardless of this position? Now, keep in mind that your priorities are going to shift and change over time. It may be that I want to work in animal welfare, but I really need marketing skills first and foremost. And so I'm going to choose a job that lets me develop those, whether or not it's in animal welfare, with the goal of getting back to working in animal welfare. So we're going to talk in a moment about informational interviews, and that's an activity I cannot recommend highly enough. Now, some of you may already have a lot of experience with these, and some of you are probably just getting ready to start. So before we jump into this topic, I'd like to pause and hear from you. What's a word that comes to mind when you think about doing an informational interview? And go ahead and use the chat window there and throw some words out there of what comes to mind for you when you hear informational interview. Networking, inquiry, curiosity, research, advice, lots of research, question marks, never heard of them, of course. There's going to be several folks here. Uh-oh, I saw yuck. Okay, we'll come back to that one. It can be awkward, informative, fun but serious. I've seen intimidating, I've seen informal, excitement, lots of information here, lots of different experiences with informational interviews. Okay, well, I am a big fan of informational interviews, and I say that as an introvert who doesn't really like small talk. The reason I like them is because they can be structured and they can be so invaluable. It's such a great way to gather more information about specific roles and career paths while also strengthening and expanding your personal and professional networks. Plus, they really are pretty easy to do, and they're not too time intensive. Overall, they can be a really great investment of your career development energy. So what an informational interview is when you meet with someone in a field or role of interest and you ask them questions about their position and their background. That's it in a nutshell. You can find an informational interview subject in a few different ways. So when you think about who should you ask, start with who you know. It'll be most comfortable this way as well. Interview colleagues and peers whose work you admire and have an interest in. And be sure to ask them who they know that you should also talk to. It's always great when someone can open the door for you. Consider connecting with partners of your current organization. Who do you work with in your community that has an interesting job or position and you'd love to learn more from? If you're using LinkedIn, you can use the search feature to type in any career field or title and see people in those fields who are connected to others in your current network. So this is an easy way to seek out an introduction through an existing contact who already knows you. They may be able to open that door for you. You can also, quote-unquote, cold call people by doing research on sites like idealist.org, monster.com, and just identifying organizations of interest. You can then go to their website, take a look at their list of their staff, and find the people whose roles sound most interesting. Then you can send them an introductory email that explains who you are, the purpose of your communications, and a request for 30 to 60 minutes of their time. Now, you really will be surprised by how many people say yes. Most individuals are happy to share insights into their work, especially with others who are looking to do something similar. Frankly, I've done this for years, and most of the time when someone says no, it's just because they're too busy. So don't be disheartened if someone says no. Keep trying. A quick note, though, before you cold contact anyone, ask around and see if someone you know knows someone at that organization. Again, it's always easier to have that door opened for you than it is to knock on it cold. Now, informational interviews are best done in person, 30 minutes to an hour, preferably over coffee or tea. Meet them at a coffee shop somewhere convenient for them. This makes for a relaxing, informal discussion. However, do treat it like a professional activity and dress and prepare appropriately. Informational interviews can also be done by phone, or if people are a fair distance away or simply unavailable to meet in live time, you can also do them by email. So, questions that you might ask them include, what educational requirements are there for their particular position? How did they come to this line of work? What did they do prior to this role? What advice might they have for others who want to do similar work? You might also ask them what their day-to-day looks like, what their primary responsibilities are, what they value most about their position. You can also ask them what they find challenging or what they find least rewarding about their work. Be sure to ask them what you should be reading, or if there are networks with which you should be connecting to learn more and meet others in the field. For example, is there a professional association you should know about? Lastly, you might consider asking them about the future of their profession. What will future jobs in their field like, and who will be best suited to fill them? So to bring this together, let's go back to my example of a career in animal welfare. I might want to research specific organizations that I admire and see whose roles are most interesting to me. So I also might want to reach out to people I know in the field to see if they might be available for an interview as well, and they might be able to see if they have recommendations for me of who else I might contact. Overall, my goal is 30 to 60 minutes of someone's time so I can ask them specific questions about their career in animal welfare. And in the process, I'm expanding my professional network by getting to know them, they're getting to know me, and hopefully they'll be able to keep their eyes open for roles that fit well for me. Now, there are a couple of rules of thumb when it comes to informational interviews. First and foremost, don't ask for a job. This isn't a search for a job, but rather for information. And that information is going to help inform your job search. So people are open to informational interviews because you're not asking anything of them but their time. Similarly, it's typically not a good idea to contact the person listed on a current job posting and ask them for an informational interview, at least as long as that job post is still live. They may frankly interpret your request as an attempt to land that job rather than just a general interest in their work. Another rule of thumb is do be prepared. Take a list of questions to ask with you so that you have a way to drive the conversation forward if it falters. This will also help ensure you get all your answers to the most compelling questions that you had. And again, as an introvert who gets nervous talking to new people, a list of questions makes it very easy to keep talking. Be gracious. Thank them for their time. If you can, offer to pick up the tab for the coffee. Frankly, a lot of times they won't let you because they're in a profession, and oftentimes you're a student or an AmeriCorps member, and they'll say, no, 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 I've got this. But at least offer. It's the kind thing to do. And always, always follow up. Send them a quick note. Thank them for their time. This begins the process of staying in touch with them, and you can potentially foster this relationship over the lifetime of your career. I have colleagues that I consider to be my peers now who I did informational interviews with 10 years ago. So hold on to those connections. And again, for more information on informational interviews, I do recommend that you check out the chapter in Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers. There's some great more information in there on informational interviews. And then the fourth activity that we have here under research and networking is getting involved. Oh, volunteering, you guys have never heard this before. There's a reason though. I want you to think about it in terms of strategic volunteering. This means identifying those skills and talents that you'd most like to further hone or develop, and then seek volunteer roles that will give you that opportunity to do so. Similarly, if you've identified particular kinds of organizations of interest, volunteering with them will give you insight into what it's like to spend your time there. What does a day look like from the inside? Similarly, board service is another great way to expand your network and bolster your resume with leadership and governance skills. So think about these strategic roles as ways for you to help fill the gaps on your resume and make you an even stronger candidate for your job of choice. Now, you'll also want to think about professional associations. There may be professional associations for either your current career and or your desired profession, and you may want to connect with them so that you can get to know others, be reading the right sources, stay abreast of what matters in your particular field. And then lastly, think about online communities. Where can you meet others? Where can you develop connections and learn more about your career of choice? And now I want to pause because I want to pass the microphone, so to speak, to Signa Bishop, who's going to tell you a little bit more about her particular experiences.
Thanks, Erin. I'm happy to be here and to be able to share my experience with fellow VISTA members as an alum. So my career path has been very similar to what Erin described, definitely nonlinear, and I've used many of the activities and resources that she suggested in my own career exploration. I launched my career as a VISTA with a statewide team with various focus areas. This was advantageous in that I got to learn a lot about the different kinds of service VISTAs were doing around the state. I got to meet and work with a ton of community partners, and I had the opportunity to meet a few of my teammates, supervisors, and colleagues, which helped me build my network of nonprofit professionals. In fact, it was this serendipitous and relatively effortless networking that got me an interview and a job, and my first job after VISTA. One of my fellow VISTAs was leaving her organization, and the host nonprofit was hiring a staff person to sustain her position as a volunteer coordinator. She encouraged me to apply, and I knew her supervisor through the VISTA program I was a part of. This got me in the door, and the skills I gained as a VISTA helped me to speak to how I would perform the responsibilities of the role. And voila, I got the job. I also found out later that they received over 40 applications for that position. So this experience helped solidify for me how critical networking really is. Erin spoke about luck and opportunity being a component of finding your dream job, and in this case, it was certainly true for me. However, now I try to make my own luck by intentionally preparing for my next career move. To illustrate this point, I'll add as an aside that my first VISTA position after college, aside from my first VISTA position after college, I've been connected with someone at each of the 4 jobs I've held since 2006, previous to my hiring. Furthermore, I've met in person each of my future supervisors through various networking opportunities. So the question then is, how does one make this happen? Well, Erin highlighted all the strategies I used, including board service, joining professional associations, and also simply talking with my friends and colleagues about my career goals. I'm also a total proponent of the informational interview. My first VISTA position happened to be in a career center, so I learned a lot about the benefits of this strategy early on. Initially, again, as an introvert, I was really nervous about making that first ask for an informational interview, but every single one of the professionals I reached out to was totally supportive and even appreciative of being asked. So, sounds easy, right? Well, okay, maybe not, but let's make it real. Here's a specific example of how an informational interview helped me. About 4 years ago, I was struggling with a part of my job that had to do with facilitating training, and I needed some expert help and advice. I just didn't have enough experience at that point to solve the issue that I was having. So I had a friend and colleague who was in a graduate program for adult learning, and she recommended that I talk with one of her fellow grad cohort members who was an extremely skilled trainer. She set up a coffee date for all of us, and as a result, I got the support and advice I needed at that time to overcome my job-related challenge. Little did I know, 2 years later, I applied for my current role at OHSU, and the friend of a friend I'd met over coffee was the hiring manager and is now my current supervisor. Crazy, right? Well, maybe, maybe not, considering that this was a professional connection formed in the field that I am now pursuing as a career. So now I know you're all totally sold 100% on the informational interview, but just in case you still have reservations, I'll just say that having been on the receiving end of informational interview requests and subsequent coffee dates, I can absolutely speak to how fun they are, how flattered I always am to be asked, as well as to the experience really being reciprocal and that I get to learn about and build a relationship with someone who may very well be a colleague one day. I also see it as an opportunity to give back and spread around some of that luck that I was fortunate enough to encounter. So thanks for letting me join you today, and I'll hand it back over to Erin for a few closing activities and Q&A.
Thank you so much, Signa. Just to second what she just said, I can't agree more, I can't agree less, I can't agree, I believe it's more, with how much fun it is to be on the receiving end of informational interviews. So again, don't be scared and don't think you're bothering people. It really is genuinely fun to just talk about your work with someone who's excited to learn more about it. All right, so before we get to next steps and resources and open the floor for questions, I want to sum up what we've learned thus far. So start with personal reflection. Take the time to really consider what are your interests, what are your skills, and what might you like to do. Engage your colleagues, your family, and your friends. Seek that peer input because they are going to identify things that you may have never considered. And then do your research and your networking. Take some time to explore what your particular interests might be, what types of jobs are out there. Do the activities in the guide that we shared to learn a little more about what lights you up, what kind of work is most interesting to you today. Spend some time thinking about informational interviews, learning more from other people, taking time to ask them the questions so that you have a complete understanding of what that job looks like. Think about volunteering and serving strategically. Again, I know you guys are volunteering already all the time, but take a chance to think, okay, what skills do I need on my resume and how might I gain them through voluntary service? Similarly with board service, it's an opportunity to learn leadership and governance skills, and again, to build your network. And then join professional associations and online communities in an effort to connect with others, stay abreast of what matters to your particular field, and stay connected to hear about jobs as they open up. Now, as far as next steps, there are a couple things I'd like to consider have you consider to do in the next week. The first is take some time to brainstorm your skills, talents, and interests beyond what we did here today. Schedule time on your calendar for a brief self-assessment. Then choose at least one of the career exploration activities that we talked about today to complete, preferably within the next 2 weeks. Download the guide, go straight to the chapter, and I believe you can download it by chapter, but if not, you can still skip straight to the one of interest and go through and figure out what might work for you. See if you can learn something from completing one of the activities. And then lastly, identify 3 types of individuals or organizations from whom you'd like to learn via informational interview. If you want to take the next step and actually identify 3 individuals to contact, awesome, go for it. But think at least about, hey, I know I want to talk to someone who's an executive director, or I want to talk to someone who works in an organization around education. Think about the types of individuals you want to learn from. And I'm even going to have you start on that one right now, because what I'd like to ask you to do is, if you're willing, please share one or more of the types of persons or organizations you'd like to connect with in that chat window so that individuals can potentially connect right now. It may very well be that there are others on the webinar today who, hey, I know someone who's a project manager, or I know someone who works in environmental planning. I have someone I can connect you to. So again, take advantage of the existing network that is here right now today. And keep doing that. Don't stop. At the same time, I'm going to share with you some resources that you can potentially take a look at. Here are some of the job search sites that I've recommended that you can take a look to do the job tracks activity. You can look for currently available positions. Again, these are great sources to do the research activities. You'll note the link at the top, Idealist Careers. That's where you'll find the Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers, a free downloadable ebook. It's under their Resources tab. And then a second set of resources are those specific to VISTA. Now, there are several outstanding resources developed by AmeriCorps Vista specifically for AmeriCorps Vista members. First, I recommend that you check out the great resources at Preparing for Life After Vista. You'll see the URL on your screen here. Also, after you successfully complete your VISTA service, you are eligible for non-competitive eligibility, or NCE status, when applying for federal jobs. This special status streamlines the federal hiring process, and while it doesn't guarantee you a federal position, it does allow you to be considered for federal employment without going through the standard recruitment process, which is, frankly, a plus for both you and the hiring agency. So, if federal employment interests you, be sure to learn more about it by visiting the NCE page on the VISTA campus. And then Employers of National Service was launched in September 2014 by President Obama. This initiative recognizes the valuable skills gained by those who serve with AmeriCorps and also Peace Corps, because according to Obama, I've lost my set. There we go. Citizens who perform, I'm doing a direct quote here, I have to read it right, I'm quoting the president. Citizens who perform national service are special and you want them on your team. So check out the Employers of National Service webpage for a list of participating companies where you'll have an advantage. And then last but not least, do check out the network of AmeriCorps alums. I'm connected to that network. A lot of the folks here on the call are connected to that network. And it's great access to resources as well as expanding your network. You're talking to fellow AmeriCorps alums, many of whom have been out for a while and are active in the career space and are happy to guide you forward. So keep going with your networking that I can see going on in the chat window. I love it. And with that, though, I'm going to pass the mic back over to Andy.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin, for this fantastic presentation, all the strategies and ideas, and thank you, Signa, as well, for your experiences and observations. So as I mentioned earlier, we provided this reflection guide as kind of an experiment. We're testing out a new approach to interactive learning via the webinar. So we've got a quick poll on the right. We'd like to know if you had a chance to download that reflection guide, what you think of it, and if we should do it again. So if you would take a minute to give us your thoughts about the optional reflection guide, and that'll help us to know whether we should create those for other webinars that are coming up. And then in just a minute, we're going to ask you to give us your thoughts about the webinar overall. As you know, we love to hear what you think about the webinar that you experienced today, what worked for you, what could have been done differently. We take all of that to heart. And also, we want to hear your ideas for other webinar topics that we could offer in the future. So if there's some other thing that maybe got sparked by today's presentation that you'd really love to hear about, we want to know that as well. So we're doing planning for next year and love to have your ideas. So you'll see that evaluation poll will open in just a couple seconds. And while you're working on that, I want to now invite your questions. So you see the poll there on the right. So there are two ways that you can ask a question, as some of you have discovered. We have the Q&A box. It's now probably closed for you. It appears above the evaluation poll. But you can click the little triangle next to the letters Q&A. That box will open. You can submit your question electronically. Or if you've dialed into the phone and you want to ask a question by phone, I'm going to ask Terry, our operator, to come back and give us those instructions. Terry?
Thank you, sir. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, that is going to be *1 on your touch-tone phone. *1 to ask a question. To withdraw your question from the queue, please press * then 2. Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, star 1. You'll be asked to state your name prior to joining the queue. Please make sure your mute feature is unmuted and you state your name clearly. One moment, please.
Great. And while we're waiting for questions to come in by the phone, we've got a few already in queue here in the WebEx. First up, Shannon has a question, and she says, I've already had my dream job, but unfortunately the nonprofit was not run in a sustainable way. She asks, is it more important to do good things or to have a good job? And how can we support the former, meaning how can we support jobs that allow us to do good things? So Erin, do you have some thoughts about that?
Wow, we could have coffee and discuss that for a couple hours. It's a very big question. I think my answer is I don't think you have to choose one or the other. I think that there are plenty of good jobs where you can also do good things. It's a matter of finding the right balance for yourself. I understand entirely what you're talking about. I think almost everyone has a story somewhere in their job history of a job they really loved, but something about it didn't fit or something changed, or that for one reason or another they had to leave that position. And there is a grieving when you've had that quote-unquote dream job that you're looking for something else. I think the most important thing from that is to identify what made it your dream job. Was it the type of work you were doing? Was it the environment? Was it the focus of the work? Identify what about it made it so special, and then seek out those attributes in another place. As far as if you have an opportunity to take a job that it's not working in nonprofit or public or environmentally focused in some way, and you're having that battle thinking, oh man, I don't know if I should take this, I really thought I'd always do work that was focused on the public good. Remember, that's not your forever job. If it's a job that fits for you right now because the paycheck is good, because you're going to learn something from it, take what you can from that experience. Consider staying as long as it makes sense for you. Make sure it aligns with your values, of course, but and then seek to do good work through volunteering, through other service. And again, you may keep that job for 1 year, you may keep that job for 10 years. It's a constant assessment process for you of what is the right fit. So I think ultimately my answer is an unsatisfying. I think both matter. And so the trick here is to try to find what fits for you, and always keep in mind that what fits today doesn't mean it's going to fit tomorrow, and you're not stuck once you've taken a job.
Great, thanks, Erin. And Signa, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
Not necessarily. I think Erin covered it really well. But I've certainly had jobs where I had to sort of make a decision whether it was worth my sanity to continue doing something that I loved and that was great, but that I was getting burned out doing, or was feeling disengaged because the organization maybe wasn't a good fit at that time. And so I really think it is absolutely that balance, and I absolutely agree that that job isn't necessarily your forever job, and that you can always supplement your, what you do maybe to make money with volunteering or even philanthropy at some point as well. So, don't allow yourself to be in a place that's not good for your, your well-being. I think that's really important, and you have to take that into consideration.
Hear, hear. I agree.
Perfect. Next up, Donna asks, are your recommendations the same for VISTAs who are 50 years and over?
Ooh, awesome. Yes, actually they are, only you've got a major head start because you have a significant history of job and career development that you've been already doing. So when you're thinking about your interests and your skills, now your interests are constantly evolving, but your skills are going to be substantial. So you actually will get to do a little bit of cherry picking of, well, I have all of these skills, which ones do I want to use next? Which ones do I want to develop further, or are there skills that I've never done that I want to develop afresh? But as far as the activities, I would say do the same ones. It's just you have a slightly different lens and you have more information with which to work. Networking also, I think you probably have quite a few opportunities to go back to contacts that you may have talked to several years ago. Reconnect with colleagues from years past, and this is a great opportunity to say, hey, I'm doing some career exploration, and I know we haven't touched base in a long time, but I wanted to have a conversation with you and learn more about what you're doing today, what your work looks like. Also, as far as that peer input, you're going to have some really stellar opportunities for peers to speak to your abilities in a number of different capacities. So I would say same activities, but you have a lot of opportunity here to really shuffle the playing deck and decide which cards matter most to you at this moment. And I'll pass it to Signa if she has anything she wants to add as well.
I've met a lot of folks who've done strategic volunteering, particularly around board service, where they are developing longer-term relationships with colleagues who they're looking to move into that field or to get a job, who were very explicit during their service that I'm here to volunteer and, you know, I'm making a career transition, or I'm really excited about, you know, I'm currently looking for work, and let me know if you hear anything. And because they were developing these long-term relationships with folks who were in that same organization, they were really able to tap into sort of the expertise and to, you know, sort of get a foot in the door with those people who became really excellent long-term contacts. And I know a lot of folks that ended up getting jobs that way. So I would definitely say that these are strategies for anyone, you know, regardless of where they are in their career.
Okay, terrific. We've had a couple of questions come in about non-competitive eligibility, NCE, so I'm going to handle those quickly, but basically I'll say that's a little bit outside of the content for today's presentation, and as Erin mentioned, we do have a resource. There's a little quick animated video that describes what NCE is and how you go about using it. It's a benefit that is it lasts for a year. Once you finish your VISTA term of service, you automatically are granted this status, so you don't have to apply for it. It's good for 1 year. It can be extended, but that extension is done by the hiring authority. So the conditions under which you could extend it is, say, if you go to graduate school immediately after, if you go into some other type of, say, military service or other type of national service that doesn't come with the NCE benefit, you could, when you apply to that employer, you could request that they use their discretion to give you an extension of the NCE. All the details about that stuff are on the VISTA campus, so I'll point you there. And now I'll turn to Terry and see if we have any questions lined up on the phone.
At this time, I'm showing no questions. If you'd like to ask a question, *1.
Okay, well, we've got several others here already in queue, so we will keep moving with those. Let's see. So Suzanne says, are there resources available for those of us who have been in the workforce for a while, sort of like career redirection?
The good news is, yes, there are some terrific resources. And in fact, I focused on the Idealist Guide for first-time job seekers because that's the one they have available online for free. But there was a second book written specifically for what they called sector switchers. They meant people going from other sectors, from the private or public sector to nonprofit, but it was really designed for people who were mid-career. Now, the bad news is that one's not available free online, but the good news is they did publish them as books. So check your library, especially check an academic library, or check your bookstore. I've seen them in local bookstores as well. For the Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers for Sector Switchers, and there will be several activities in there. I imagine there's going to be a lot of crossover because, as I mentioned before, so many of these can be done regardless of where you are in your career. But there were also key strategies and steps in there for people who were mid-career looking to make a change. So first and foremost, I'd recommend looking for that. I know I'm promoting this book quite a bit, but I know the people who developed it, and they really did an outstanding job developing these guides. Otherwise, I would say, check out some of the career nonprofit workforce resources that exist online. I don't know of one particular one offhand to point you towards, but I would use some keyword searches like career redirection, career development, mid-career switch. Encore careers, for example, is another term that's used by people who switch careers later in life. And I think you're going to find some really terrific resources out there, specifically for people who have substantial experience and are looking to move in a new direction.
Great. Terrific. Next up, Taishana says, are we able to participate with AmeriCorps alums right now? And I'm guessing that she's still currently serving as an active VISTA member.
That's a great question. I don't see why not. I know that the AmeriCorps Alums puts on several different events. They host some online fairs for graduate school, for career fairs. They host webinars. They host training opportunities. I think they also try to coordinate local events. So I can't imagine that that's a problem. I would just go ahead and contact them today. They have their own website. They have their own Facebook feed. There's also local chapters of AmeriCorps alums in major cities, so you can look for your local branch. For example, I'm connected to the local Portland version of AmeriCorps alums. So yeah, I can't imagine that it's a closed door. In fact, I'm sure that they're looking to connect with folks who are currently active in their service. So I say go for it. Never too soon to start.
Yeah, and Erin, that exactly mirrors my experience with AmeriCorps alums, both nationally and to the local chapter, that they're really interested in meeting and connecting with currently serving AmeriCorps members so that it's a really smooth transition when you finish your service. And speaking of finishing service, Abby asks, or she says first, I'm looking to move after my VISTA service is over. When is a good time to actually start applying and looking for jobs? And when is it appropriate for me to talk about it with my supervisor?
That's a great question. So if you're looking to move, there's a couple different ways you can approach it. I typically, a lot of times when people advertise for paid positions, they're looking for someone to start within a couple of weeks. I think most at least assume that you're going to give a 2 to 3 week notice at your current job. So I would say if you could feasibly start that new job within a month to 6 weeks, you could probably go ahead and apply. It takes a couple of weeks usually for people to go through applications, to interview, to do all that sort of stuff. But if it's a job where I wouldn't be able to move there and start for 3 months, that's probably not going to work. So a typical rule of thumb, I would say, is if I could feasibly start this job in 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8, maybe 8, go ahead and start applying. And as far as when to let your current supervisor know, I typically wouldn't let them know until I have a pretty good job in hand. Unfortunately, certainly there are very supportive supervisors out there who would say, hey, that's awesome, you know, I'm so proud and I'm looking forward to getting you started. But there may be others who aren't ready for you to go, and again, there's a difference, I suppose, between a VISTA supervisor and a paid supervisor. So actually, let me backtrack on my own advice. If it's a paid job, usually we don't let them know until we have a job offer in hand, because we don't want to give them the heads up that we're looking to leave, because if it falls through, you may want to stay. In the VISTA case, I would say go ahead and let them know as you're nearing the end of your service that you're starting to look for jobs. Let them know what you're looking for, what types of positions, where you're looking, because they very may well have contacts in those areas where you're looking to move, and it won't be a surprise to them that your service is coming to a close. So I would say start maybe 6 weeks out, 8 weeks, you can let your supervisor know, 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, start applying. It's a pretty rough rule of thumb, and certainly there will be those who started 3 months out and those who started 2 weeks out. It's pretty fluid, but I will pause with my rambling to see if Signa has anything she wants to add, or if Andy wants to add anything.
I think Erin's advice is pretty solid. One of my recommendations would be that if you are the right candidate for that job, they'll wait a little bit longer for you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make them wait 3 months or 6 months, but they would wait a couple of weeks, I bet. So I wouldn't necessarily hesitate to put yourself out there maybe a little bit earlier. At the very least, definitely start doing informational interviews, start connecting with folks, start asking your friends, start looking at jobs to just figure out sort of what you might be interested in. Yeah, you could maybe be a little bit daring. I don't know whether that's good advice or not, but that's probably what I would do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sounds like good advice.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think.
Could happen is, oh, sorry, Andy.
Go ahead. What's the worst thing that could happen?
The worst thing that could happen is they really like you and you can't start right away, so you have to negotiate a later start time. Very worst thing that could happen is they'd say, we can't wait for you, sorry, so we're going to go with someone else, but at least you tried. So, yeah, I think that's strong advice.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think too that if you say, look, I'm committed to this VISTA position until a certain date, that they will respect you for that, because they'll see that you're the kind of person who makes a commitment and keeps it. And so I think that weighs in your favor as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's see. Next up, a question from Vanessa that I think I'm going to handle. She is really two parts to her question. First, she says, how do we continue our service with VISTA? So I'll answer that. When you get to about your 9th month of service, the VISTA Member Support Unit will unlock within your account in MyAmeriCorps a form that we call the Future Plans form. And it's your option, it's your opportunity to express what it is that you want to do. So, so around that time, if you think you want to continue serving with the project you're at, you would want to be talking with your site supervisor to say, hey, this has been great for me. I hope it's been great for you. You know, could I serve another term here? Or if you want to do VISTA but you want to do it somewhere else, you can go back to MyAmeriCorps and search the listings for other opportunities, either in the city where you're currently serving or that region, or you could look afield and see if, you know, there's something that interests you someplace else. And then, of course, you'd have to go through the regular application process with that other VISTA project. But that's how you would go about continuing service with VISTA. The second part of Vanessa's question was, how do we go about getting employment with CNCF? And that would be the same as for any other federal job, and that is to go to usajobs.gov. You'll create a profile on there, and you can set up a search agent for the kinds of jobs that you're looking for, so you'll get automatic notifications when they're posted. You'll build an online resume, and then when you find something that really interests you, you'll submit your resume online. And for any federal employment, you're going to want to make sure that you've gone through the little tutorial on NCE so you know which boxes to check and what to put in your cover letter about your non-competitive eligibility. So that's how you would go about applying to work with CNCF. We would love to have all of you working here. We don't have nearly that many positions, but we do know that VISTA alums make for great colleagues here at CNCF. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second and check with Terry to see if we have any callers on the line.
And currently, I'm showing no questions at this time.
Okay, that's great. We will go ahead then with the questions we've got here online. Kevin says, if you don't know where to look for a dream job, that is, if you aren't tied down to any specific location, how do you narrow things down to avoid getting overwhelmed?
That's a great question, Kevin. So there sounds like there were two components there. One is the specific job, and then one is the where of it. I might start with the where of it. If you're pretty fluid in terms of where you're willing to live and what kind of role you're willing to look at, I would start geographically and sort of do a wish list of here are my spots where I might want to live, and then figure out where those local job boards are. There's national sites, of course, like the ones we've listed here, and you can narrow your search geographically to see what sorts of jobs are available. You can also figure out what sort of networking groups might exist in those local communities. If you really are that fluid where you don't even have specific geographic areas, then I would stick to the national sites and just see what's available. As far as figuring out where to start, I would recommend doing like the 4 Lenses framework activity or the self-assessment, the career tracks activity, to give yourself, basically to build in some priorities. Chances are you might be really flexible in terms of what type of work you're willing to take, but chances are also there are some things you prefer over others. So the more information you can self-gather on what your priorities are, whether it's what I need to do now is make more money so I can pay down my loans, whether it's what I need right now is to gain this particular skill set, what I need right now is nonprofit experience, I mean, whatever it might be, if you're able to establish what those priorities are for yourself, I think that's going to help you narrow the search and make it a little less overwhelming as you start to dig through what jobs are available. That would be my advice.
I agree, absolutely. I think that sort of personal reflection piece is going to be key to start to launching that job search, just to help you narrow it down a little bit around what you might want to do and where you might want to be. Otherwise, you'll sort of be inundated with a lot of information. It'll be really hard to think about that within any sort of framework if you haven't already established that. So I would absolutely recommend going through some of those exercises that Erin mentioned.
All right, and our next question is sort of along the same theme about not wanting to get overwhelmed. Tanya says, I don't want to stretch myself too thin, but I also want to make the most of my VISTA service. I've already started by making connections, I'm guessing with other people. She says, I want to volunteer outside of my VISTA site, but I'm also currently pursuing my master's degree. Any suggestions?
Well, you're definitely busy, although I know that that's the lifestyle of the VISTA is to be crazy busy. I might recommend looking for volunteer positions that you can fit into your lifestyle. Like, I wouldn't recommend looking for one that's necessarily long-term. And actually, let me reframe that, not long-term, but one that requires a lot of hours per week. Board service actually would fit really well, I think, with what you're doing, depending on the board. There's a couple different kinds of boards, of course. Working boards are very hands-on, and they need you to do a lot of the nuts and bolts of the work. But governance boards typically meet once a month. You get together, you talk about priorities for the organization, you talk about financial decisions, leadership opportunities, and then collectively as a board you make those decisions. There might be committee service in addition to that, but you have a lot of say over how much work you're doing. If you plan to stay in the community you're in now for at least a year or two, you might look into doing board service. That's a great way to make those connections to gain that skill and that resume filler, but also have it fit with your studies and your VISTA service. But I would also take a look and see if there are roles that you might be able to do in your quote-unquote free time. Things like online positions, or maybe there's an advisory role where they just need someone to take a look at something and give feedback. See if there are team opportunities where you can step forward and step back based on your availability. But first and foremost, you're doing a lot already, and Signa talked about this earlier, but the self-care aspect is critical. So it sounds like you're already making some great headway and doing some really good things to be establishing yourself. You're doing your studies, you're doing VISTA. These are all great things to prepare yourself for your career development. And it may be that for now you need to limit yourself to informational interviews as you can, and then consider doing something more substantial as your schedule changes. But I would first and foremost see maybe board service, or if there are particular volunteer roles that fit well but don't require you to commit X hours per week for X weeks.
Tanya, there may also be things as part of your master's degree that you're required to do. So, for example, we had a variety of community projects that we were supposed to work on during my master's program. And so there may be things that you could do strategically in terms of volunteerism that would also get you credit during your master's program. So there may be things that you have to do already, but you could think a little bit outside the box or get some special permission to do something in an area where you're really interested in or want to get a job, and eventually to help you start networking, even though it's something that you also have to be doing for your master's program. So that might be something to think about as well.
Yeah, and of course graduate school itself is a great networking opportunity, so I'm sure, Tanya, you're already maximizing those possibilities there within, your fellow students, professors, and maybe others who come in as guest presenters. Let's move on. Sarah asks, or she makes a comment. She says, you addressed informational interviews and contacting people. She said, I feel this works better for the location where you currently are. What would you suggest for someone who's currently in one state but planning to move across the country after finishing VISTA?
Sure. There are so many great social networking, like professional social networking opportunities now that I think you could probably take advantage of some of those. LinkedIn is a great place to get connected to folks who are in a place that you are looking to move. Informational interviews can absolutely be done by Skype. They can be done over the phone. It's not something that you have to do in person, though that is sort of, nice. You can definitely, with a camera phone or a smartphone, be able to connect with folks who aren't physically, geographically near you. So I absolutely think it's possible. You just maybe have to think a little bit in terms of a broader, maybe online network that you have. But I'm sure Erin has suggestions for this as well.
Yeah, I I agree with Igna. Phone, in person is great when you can do it, but phone interviews work well. Use Skype, use something where there's a visual component if you need to. As I mentioned, you can even do them by email. You can write your questions in an email and have them answer back. But start now, because one of the biggest questions you're going to be able to ask them are, what networks do I need to plug into? Where are the jobs posted? For example, if you're in Portland and you're looking for a nonprofit job, there are 2 online listservs that are the #1 places to go to look for nonprofit jobs, more than any national site. And you wouldn't know that unless you ask a Portlander who says, oh, you need to go to this and you need to go to this. So reaching out now, even if it's a cold contact, they're going to be able to point you towards the direction of, what should I be reading, what listserv should I be on, what websites should I be perusing. How would I look for a job like in New York, or how would I look for a job like someone in San Diego, wherever you might be looking to go. And don't be afraid to do the cold contact. But again, even if it's a new city, reach out to your peers and say, hey, does anybody know anyone in X city or in these types of organizations in that city? Because they may know someone who could open the door for you. Even if it appears that their connections are local, I'm sitting in a room in Portland with several people who have colleagues and friends all over the country, if not the world. So have that door opened for you if you can, but doing it by distance is no problem at all. And in fact, that makes it so that if and when you make it to that town, you have someone you can immediately follow up with and say, hey, would you like to have coffee? I'd love to connect with you again and let you know what I'm up to, and follow up with you in person to thank you again for your time.
Ooh, that's great advice. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Kenneth says, I'll have 6 months in between the official close of my AmeriCorps service and graduate school. Will it be hard for me to find a full-time job if employers know that I'll be gone in half a year?
Probably.
Yeah, unfortunately that will be tough. Most people, by the time they've actually trained you and gotten you up to speed to where they don't need to oversee your work, then you would be leaving. And typically it's not great form professionally to take the job knowing that you're going to leave them. I would instead look for seasonal work if you can. There are seasonal positions where they need people to step in, or even it's basically like subletting an apartment, it's subletting a job. Someone might be on medical leave, they might be on maternity or paternity leave, and they need someone to step in for X number of months. Look for positions that have contract roles or that have a specific length to them. Or look for part-time, and just basically you could be really honest with them and say, this is the frame of time I have available. But my honest advice is that full-time work for a 6-month period is going to be pretty tough to secure.
Temping might be a good option, though. I have had lots of friends who've had great success with temping for a very short amount of time, and it very often can be full-time, and it really is someone just stepping into a role that they need someone very short-term to help out. And it's actually, in a lot of their examples, has been a great networking opportunity as well. So I would certainly recommend looking into temp agencies or temporary positions.
I agree. I've done temping myself, and it's a great space filler. And it's a great way also to be doing work while you're looking for work.
Yeah, and getting experience in something that maybe you don't have experience in, and learning about whether you like it or not.
Yep, I agree.
And on the subject of graduate school, Sambhavi asks, do you have any advice on selecting a graduate school program?
I do. The first and foremost looking for is what you want to study. My advice is, this is similar to a job, frankly. You're going to use a couple different lenses. You're going to look at what you want to study, where you want to study it, what the cost of studying is, including, what sort of financial support they might provide. And then weighing what it is that you want to do with that degree. To use myself for an example, I wanted to do my PhD and study civic engagement, but I had a hard time finding a program that would fit for that. And I narrowed it down to Portland State University, where I could have a lot of leeway. I could live in the Northwest, and it was a relatively inexpensive school. Or also Harvard had a program in government that I could have maybe tried to make it work, and I really wrestled with that and thought, should I try to apply to go to Harvard? What a scary idea. I don't think I'd get in. It's so expensive. I don't know. And ultimately I decided, well, I want my PhD because I want to be a practitioner, I want to teach on the side, but I'm not looking to be a full-time academic. So it probably doesn't matter to my employers whether I went to Portland State or Harvard. They just want to see that I finished my degree and studied this topic. So that was a decision maker for me of, I don't need the prestige of Harvard, so I also don't want to necessarily live in Boston and the other factors that came into play. You know, of course, Harvard has a great scholarship program that Portland State didn't have quite as much of, but I was still able to secure a scholarship. So I would do sort of the 4 lenses framework, but do it for grad school of what matters most to you. Is it the location where you'd be studying? Do they offer, the location that you're interested in, do they offer a program that offers what you want to do? Talk to students, talk to people who are current students. I can't recommend that enough. They're going to be able to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly of being a student there. Talk to financial aid, ask them what sort of support they provide, what are the actual chances of getting that support. Talk to the program itself, of course. If you can make a visit, that's great. You can get a sense for a place by visiting. If you can't, you know, it's expensive to fly around the country. That's okay. You can gather a lot of information from social media and from talking to people on the phone and via email. There are, of course, resource guides like the Princeton Review that rank universities and give you information on what their programs are like. Again, if that's something that's a critical piece of your decision-making, you can do that. And then there are grad fairs that travel around the country. If you're specifically looking to do a degree in some area related to public good or environmental good, Idealist does a series of grad fairs, in major U.S. cities. You can go to their website and see what the dates are. AmeriCorps alum does an online grad school, grad school fair, where you can actually show up online and ask representatives questions in chat windows. So look for grad fairs where you can ask questions and just try to narrow that search using the various lenses you have of what matters most to you. Do you want to stay in a particular part of the country? What is it that you're studying, and do they offer it? That would be my advice.
Wow, that's amazing for not having prepared on the subject of graduate school, that you just can provide all that information. Thank you so much, Erin. We've got time for a few more questions. I'm going to check again with Terry to see if anybody's coming on the phone line.
I'm showing no questions at this time, sir. If you'd like to ask a question, *1.
Great. Thank you, Terry. And just to remind everybody, we do really care about your opinion on this webinar and suggestions for other topics that we could present. So if you would click on the polling icon and answer our little evaluation, that would be much appreciated. And now back to our questions. Renata says, how do employers view self-created opportunity, such as assisting an organization with their marketing and planning? I developed an informal connection with a family farm that wants to expand its business to include increased marketing and event planning.
I think most employers would think that's great. They want to see that you can take initiative, that you're able to deliver on your outcomes. I think there's some layers to this, that if it was that you sort of went off and did it on your own without working with your organization and they didn't know it was happening, then an employer might say, wait a minute, what's going on? But it sounds to me like you were doing it under the auspices of the organization, that you had, effectively they said, okay, go do this. You found an opportunity. You came back to them and said, look, we have this opportunity to develop this partnership, and they gave you the green light. That's excellent. Future employers would look to that and say, this is someone who can get things done. My suspicion is that telling the story of how you were able to initiate and deliver on that type of partnership is going to be something that will be really valuable in your job search.
I absolutely agree. I think it sounds a lot like pursuing a volunteer opportunity. I think employers would see it sort of like that. And I think really that story about your initiative and being tenacious and going out and getting that is really going to be a compelling story for employers.
All right, great. Let's see, we have a question from Africa who says, it looks like Africa is interested in the field of social work and in the state of Alabama. It says, where would be the best place to begin a search in the field of social work in Alabama?
Goodness, unfortunately I'm not as connected with the field of social work, so I don't know if there are specific national boards. So what I would say is identify social work agencies in your town or in other towns in Alabama and reach out to them and say, hey, if I'm looking for work in this field, in this area, where should I be looking? People within the field are going to know where the jobs get posted. So it's also, frankly, a great door opener to do an informational interview. So I would, trusty Google doesn't turn up something, and if you're looking at the national sites and you're not seeing much, actually, even if you are looking at the national sites, I would still do this. Identify social work agencies, send a couple of cold emails and just say, hey, I'm interested in looking into this field. Where are the jobs posted? Where should I be paying attention? That would be my advice.
Universities with graduate programs in social work too would probably, you could just call them up and have a conversation with the person over the phone about where their graduates tend to get jobs, what kinds of things that they would recommend, and I think that that's kind of their job to do that. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely encourage you to check in with the local universities that have programs in that area.
Yeah, great suggestion.
All right. Francesca says, I'm in a master's degree in public relations. I'm currently in my last year and doing my thesis. She said, are there AmeriCorps opportunities that are part-time? And I'll take this question on. So within the VISTA program, all of our positions, both the full year and summer associate VISTA positions, are full-time, so essentially 40 hours a week. But AmeriCorps State and AmeriCorps National programs do offer part-time AmeriCorps positions, and so you would go to My AmeriCorps and do a search, and you could put in, where you're looking, and you would check state and national, and then you could also look for part-time and find out those opportunities. So that's a great way to stay connected in national service while you're pursuing your master's degree and writing a thesis. And I'm looking here. So we've had just a couple questions come in right at the end, and we're going to have time for maybe one or two more. So Abby says, if I'm interested in setting up an informational interview, do I just call and ask?
You could. I tend to prefer emailing first just because you may not get them at their desk or in the right mood or moment to ask them. But I would go to their website, take a look at their staff list, see whose role sounds interesting. Oftentimes they'll have an email address on there. If they don't, you're certainly welcome to call the front desk and say, hey, I would love to send an email to one of your staff members. Is there an email I should use? The other reason I like email is because you can think out in advance how you want to say, this is who I am, this is the reason I'm emailing. You have an opportunity to do a bit of a script, especially if you're doing this for the first time. That can be a little more comforting because you can hone your language and make sure you like it. You also, frankly, can then copy and paste it into other emails to other people that you want to contact. But having said that, if you're good on the phone and you feel confident that you can just call up, then certainly you're welcome to try it. I fully admit that there are many people in the world who prefer phone calls. I'm one of those people that prefers emails. So I'm sure that colors my answer a bit. But yeah, just cold contact people and just explain the reason for your communications, that you just want to learn more from them what their role is like as you develop your own career. And like I said, you'll be surprised by how many people will be totally willing to participate.
Mm-hmm. If they're in the same geographical area as you two, it's very likely that you are somehow connected to them through contacts you currently have at your VISTA position, or friends, or folks that you know through school, whatever. So I would do a little bit of research first and see if there's any way that you could get an introduction for this person, just because it makes it so much easier. And but you can absolutely cold email or cold call them, and that works just as well.
I get both. I get people who say, hey, I know a friend of yours. I get someone who introduces them, and I also get ones who say, I saw your bio online and thought I wanted to follow up and see if you'd have a conversation. And speaking for myself and for others who have been willing to speak to me, I'm totally fine with either.
Yeah, and usually you can send folks a message on LinkedIn too, which is another way that's nice to communicate because it's a networking site, and so they put themselves out there in order to get inquiries and connections like this, and so it's a very natural forum for making that connection with someone who you might not know.
Agree.
All right. Well, thank you both, Erin and Signe, so much for all the experience and expertise you've shared today. We're going to have to leave it there as we've run out of time, but I do want to thank everybody who participated today in today's session, to thank our technical team, Jessica Knight and Andy Clark at Education Northwest, for producing today's program, and again, Dr. Erin Barnhart and Signe Bishop, both in Portland, Oregon, for your time and expertise today. And then I'd like to invite all of you to our next VISTA webinar, which is Translating VISTA Service to Your Resume and Career, coming up on September 17th. And we'll have a chance to hear from Dr. Barnhart again next month. So thank you all for participating today, and we hope to see you again soon.